All right, hello everybody. In this video, I want to follow up on some of the things that we've been talking about regarding JavaScript. So we've covered functions and if statements and operators in recent lessons, and I just want to dig a little bit deeper into those right now. What I've done is I created a file inside the JavaScript folder, so you can go ahead and create a file too. Now I gave this a really big long name because that's kind of what we're talking about. It's called More on Functions, If Statements, and Operators.html. You don't necessarily have to give it a big long name like that, but just go ahead and create a file and we'll be dinking around in here a little bit with some sample code. Okay, and then what I did, I'm gonna stretch this back to small here. Then what I did is I just put in the starter code like we've done many times before, and I added a title, and then I suppose we should also add a script element here too. So go ahead and set that up. So I'm just going to put the script element underneath the title here. Okay, and then I'm going to split the opening and closing script tags apart, and then we can get started. Okay, the first thing that I want to talk about are what we call nested function calls. Okay, and to introduce this, I'm going to pull over the web page here that this video is on that you're watching, and I want to give you this math example right here. So here, I'm hoping that you'll all be able to figure this out, but in math, when you see the parentheses, they determine the order of operations here. So to solve this equation right here, you would start in the innermost parentheses and then evaluate each expression and then work your way out. So 3 plus 1, that expression evaluates to 4. Then the next thing I would do is this, it would become 4 times 2 right there. So that everything that I have selected there would evaluate to 8. And then we move to the next set of parentheses and it would be 10 minus 8, and that expression results in or evaluates to 2. So that's how we could solve this. Okay, now you can do something similar with function calls, and it works. It follows the same pattern where you work from the innermost function call out. So let me explain what I mean here. Here's another example that we've seen in class. We talked about how when you ask a user to enter any information, it always returns a string. So here we're asking the user to enter their age, which should be a number, but anytime you use the prompt function, it's always going to return a string. So this variable right here, the data type of it is going to be string. Okay, so I showed you that there's a way to convert strings into numbers if possible. Not all strings can be converted into numbers, but if this had the string 11 in it, that can be converted into a number, and you can use the parse int function to do that. Okay, and so what I want to show you is these two lines right here can be condensed into one line by using function calls. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this code here, and I'll show you what I mean here. So you can copy it or you can type it in, but I'm going to copy it and take it on over into VS Code here, and I'm just going to paste it right there. Okay, and now what I can do is instead of having this line here, I can actually delete that line and instead take whatever the prompt function returns. So I put my cursor right there before the P in prompt, and there I will call the parse int function like this. So I'm going to type in parse int and then put an opening parentheses there, and then I'm going to move my cursor to the other side of the statement and put another closing parentheses right here. Okay, so what I've done is this is what we call nested function calls here. So you work your way from the inside out, just like that math expression that I just showed you. So here we're calling the prompt function, and whatever that returns will become the parameter that gets passed into the parse int function in this case right here. Okay, so if the user enters 11, that's going to evaluate to the string 11. So that's what the prompt function call is going to return. So let me go ahead and replace that with the string 11. Okay, because that's what the prompt function call would have returned if the user entered 11. Okay, and then the parse int function will take that string 11 and convert it into the number 11. so that we can make sure it's the right data type in case we want to do math operations with it. So if I evaluate this expression here, or this function call, it's going to end up being an 11 without the quotation marks around it. Okay, so this is kind of interesting because this is how the computer evaluates your code. Just little bit by bits. In the case of nested function calls, it works its way from the inside out. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do Control Z and put it back to that because that's what you should have right here. So if you want, you can put a comment that says nested function calls. Okay, now here's a pretty simple example. There's only 2 functions being called in this one line right here, but you could, in theory, you could nest many function calls, but that gets to be a little bit confusing. So it can make a line of code a little bit more confusing. I tend to not like it if there's more than 2 function calls nested, but I want to show you this because a lot of programmers will do this. It's pretty common to nest function calls. Okay, so in summary, and I know I said this a few times already, but you just want to work your way out, and whatever the inner function returns, that becomes the parameter for the next function moving outward. Okay, so it's kind of interesting how that works. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is nested if statements. So you could put this comment here if you want. And you can nest if statements. Now, it looks a little bit different than what we were just talking about, but here's what I want to do here. Let's do this. Let's all declare a variable using let, and we'll call it answer, and then we'll set that equal to whatever the prompt function returns here. And the parameter that we're going to pass inside of the prompt function is going to be a string that says, do you like ice cream? Okay. All right, and then now what we want the user to actually enter is either a Y or an N. So just to make things nice and easy. So I'm going to put this inside the string that we're passing in here. Okay, so that's really what we want them is to enter a Y or an N. I'm sure you've seen this if you've used the command line before. Okay, all right, now I'm going to start with an if statement right underneath that. I'm going to go if the answer is double equal to y, then we're going to do something. Okay, so here, if they answered yes, they like ice cream, then we're going to follow up with another question, which is going to be, do you prefer chocolate or vanilla? Okay, so inside the block for this if statement, let's type this in. Answer equals prompt. We're going to prompt again here, and then we'll say, do you like chocolate or vanilla? Okay, and then what we really want them to enter to let us know is either a C or a V. So in parentheses here, I'm going to put C/V. And again, you'll see that a lot. Okay, and then I'm going to put a semicolon there, even though that's not required. Okay, so if they say yes, if they enter Y, we prompt them again. And notice that we can reuse this answer variable. And that's why I declared it with let here. Okay, because I knew that we were going to reassign another value to it. So that's why I used let. Okay, now underneath that line that we just entered, I'm going to put another if statement in here. So I'm going to check to see if they like chocolate. So what I'll do here is if answer is double equal to C, just like that. And by the way, this is case sensitive. So if they entered an uppercase C, then our program might not work right, but we'll worry about those details later. Okay, and then I'm going to put my curly braces here for my nested if statement. And then what I can do here is let's just go ahead and alert something inside this code block here. So we'll go alert, here's your chocolate ice cream, something like that. Here's, whoops, oh golly darn, I was typing so well up until this last minute here. Here's your chocolate ice cream. Okay, and then I'll turn this into an if-else statement. So I'm going to put a semicolon there before I forget. And then I'm going to move down to the next line down, and I'm going to turn this if statement into an if-else statement by typing in else and then a pair of curly braces. And then I'm going to split the curly braces apart. And in here, I'm going to do an alert that says, here's your vanilla ice cream. Okay, now this isn't a great program. I mean, it's kind of, there's some potential flaws in it. Like, for example, if the user doesn't enter a C or a V here, then they're going to get vanilla ice cream, even though that may not be what they wanted. Okay, but you get the idea here. What we have is an if statement that's nested inside of another if statement. Okay, so this is where, I think this is why they call them code branches, because if you have code like this, like if statements nested within one another, they're like branches of a tree where the code branch could break off into other branches here. Okay, now if this is hard to look at, you might want to put some breathing room in here by maybe a few spaces. I don't know, some people like to do that, some people don't, but if that makes it easier to read, then go ahead and add some spaces or empty lines, I should say. But hopefully you get the idea here. Now, just like with nested function calls, you could keep nesting these many levels deep, but at some point your code gets to be very difficult to read then. So there are strategies for writing code so that you don't have to nest many if statements together. Okay, so you will run into nested if statements here. Okay, moving on down here, the next thing I want to talk about are what we call algorithms. I'm sure you've heard of this. Maybe you don't know what they are, but you've probably heard the word before. Okay, now an algorithm is a series of steps that you can use to solve a problem or complete a task. I'm going to pull over the web page that this video is on, and I want to show you an algorithm here. So here's the web page, and then here's the section I'm looking at. Okay, what we want to do is we are going to follow these steps, this algorithm. We're going to ask the user if they like books. Okay, if the user likes books, then ask them if they like sci-fi books. Okay, if the user likes sci-fi books, and see how I used nested lists here, and that's what our code is going to end up looking like. It's going to be indented kind of like these nested lists here. So if the user likes sci-fi books, then we're going to recommend Frankenstein. Okay, if the user does not like sci-fi books, then we're going to recommend the book Gone with the Wind. Okay, so all of this stuff here is what we do if the user likes books. Okay, now that takes us down to this item right here. If the user does not like books, then what are we going to do? Okay, if the user does not like books, then we want to ask them if they like movies. Okay, if the user likes movies, then we're going to recommend the movie Social Networking. I don't know if you guys have seen that or not. It's kind of old now. Okay, if the user does not like movies, then we're going to recommend that they take up knitting. Okay, all right. So you should, as a programmer, when you get good at this stuff, you should be able to take algorithms like this, written instructions, and convert them into code. So let's go ahead and do that real quick right now. Okay, so right here underneath this comment, I'm going to go ahead and declare a constant, and I'll just call it likes books, and we'll set that equal to the prompt function call, and we'll say, do you like books? And then we'll add, just to keep things short, we'll ask them to really enter a Y or an N. Okay, just like that. And then we'll do an if statement. So if they like books, then we need to ask them what type of book they like. So here we need an if statement. So I'll set up an if statement, if pair parentheses, pair curly braces, split the curlies apart like that. And that's what I call setting the table. And then I go back in and fill the details. So the Boolean expression here is going to be this. We want to know if the variable likes books is double equal to the string y, because that's what we ask them to enter if they like books. Okay, now let's do this. There's a lot of different ways we could write this code based on the algorithm I showed you. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and, before we go into this code block right here for our if statement, I'm going to go ahead and add an else if like this. So I'm going to do else space if, pair parentheses, pair curly braces. Okay, so now I'm turning this into a ladder if statement like we talked about when we were talking about if statements. Here, the Boolean expression I'm going to use right here is going to be if likes books is double equal to the character n or the string n like that. Okay. And now I'm going to add a final else to this. So what I want to do here is just add else right there. And then I don't need an else if, it's just going to be else in a code block like that. Okay, so else in a pair of curly braces. And if we end up in this code branch, then the user did not enter valid input. So look at this. Here we ask them to enter a y or an n. If they enter y, we're going to go down this code branch right here on my line 28. And if they enter an n, then we're going to go down this code branch right here on my line 30. And if they enter anything else, then it's not valid input. So right here, I'm going to do an alert that says invalid input. Okay, so we're starting to bulletproof our code a little bit and try and think of all the things that can go wrong and then account for them in our code. So I'll just make that, do that. Okay, and now I'll go back and work on the other two branches of this ladder if statement right here. Okay, so let's go back to the first one here, and I'm going to put some blank lines in there just to give me some breathing room here. Okay, now in this case, the user likes books, so we're going to ask them if they like sci-fi books. Okay, so I'll declare a constant and I'll call it likes sci-fi like that. And then I'll set that equal to the prompt function call that we're going to call here. And we'll say, do you like sci-fi books? And then we want them to really answer a y or an n. So I'll put y/n there, just like that. And then a semicolon to end that statement on the end of that line. And here's where we're going to put a nested if statement. Okay, so I'm going to start another if statement. Now the indentation is so important for these so that you can read these. If the indentation is messed up, then it's really difficult to read these nested if statements. So here I'm going to type in if and pair parentheses, pair curly braces. I'm going to split the curly braces apart. So I'm setting the table here, and then I'm going to turn this into an if-else statement. So I'm going to put my cursor right down there after that closing curly brace, and then type in else, and then another pair of curly braces like that. And then I'm going to split those apart. And now there's different ways we could go about doing this, but this is just what I decided to do in the spur of the moment here. But the Boolean expression that I'm going to put inside of the if statement here is going to be this. If likes sci-fi is double equal to the string y, and they have to enter a lowercase y, otherwise it's not going to match. This Boolean expression will not result in true here. Then inside the code block here, we're going to alert I recommend Frankenstein. Okay, there we go. All right, now if they don't like sci-fi, we're just going to alert I recommend Gone with the Wind. So here inside this code block for the else branch, we'll do alert, and then I recommend Gone with the Wind. Okay, all right, so we're this is like very primitive artificial intelligence where a program gathers information and then makes recommendations based on the information. Okay, so anyways, you can maybe kind of sort of think of this as like very primitive artificial intelligence. Okay, so that's what's going to happen. If the user likes books, then we're going to either recommend Frankenstein or Gone with the Wind. Again, this isn't perfect because what if they don't enter a y or an n here? We're not accounting for that in this if-else statement. Okay, we can talk about this in class. I'm going to move on down to this branch right here for if they don't like books. And I'm going to put another if statement in here in a second. But first what I'm going to do is declare a constant and call it likes movies to see if the user likes movies. And then we'll assign that a value by calling the prompt function. So after the equal sign, I'll type in prompt, do you like movies? Be careful with your syntax and your quotation marks. And again, we're going to really ask them to enter y or n. Okay, and then put a semicolon on the end of that line and hit return a few times. And now here I'm going to put another nested if statement right here. So I'll just set the table and set up the syntax first. So I'll go if, pair parentheses, pair curly braces, move your cursor in between the curly braces and split them apart. Okay, and then I'm going to set the table for the else block here. So I put my cursor right there after that closing curly brace, type in else, and then another pair of curly braces, and then I'm going to split those curly braces apart. Now I can fill in the details in the code blocks. So I'm going to move up to the parentheses where we put the Boolean expression. And here I'm going to say if likes movies is double equal to y. That's all we need, and make sure you put quotation marks around y because we're comparing the likes movies the value stored in the likes movies variable. We're comparing that value to the string y. Okay, and here in this case we're going to alert. So in that code branch we'll say I recommend social networking. It's kind of a nerd movie, that's why I chose it. It's about the beginning of Facebook. Okay, all right, so that's what happens if they say they like movies. Okay, if they don't like movies, we already know they don't like books if we end up in this branch right here. So we're just going to recommend knitting in this case. So we'll go alert, and then we'll say I recommend knitting. All right, so that's kind of a complicated set of code right here, and I hope you can follow it. But we've got two if statements nested inside of another if statement. We've got this one here and this one here, and they are both nested inside of this one here. And again, the indentation is critical in being able to read this code. So make sure you follow the rules of indentation. So everything inside of a code block should be indented. So here, everything inside of this code block is indented, okay? Everything inside of this code block is indented, okay? Very important, otherwise your code is difficult to read. If you don't indent it right, you'll be dealing with bugs all the time that you can't fix, and no other programmers will want to work with you. Okay, let's run this and make sure that it works. So we need to run it by testing all branches here. So I'm gonna go ahead and save my changes, and then load this page up in the browser. Where do I have it? It's right here. And then hit refresh. Okay, okay, this is entering your age. This is the first one. So I'm just gonna, all right, here we go. Nope, this is do you like ice cream? Oh my gosh. So I forgot about all this stuff. Okay, so finally, after I get through the age and the ice cream alerts, now it says, do you like books? I'm going to go ahead and choose yes. So now I expect it to ask me if I like sci-fi books. Let's see if it's working the way we expect it to. Okay, do you like sci-fi books? That's what I expected. Okay, here I'm going to answer N. So what do I expect to happen? I think it's going to recommend Gone with the Wind. If I don't see that, then I think there might be a problem with my code. So here I'll hit OK, and there we go. I recommend Gone with the Wind. So now, just to keep this video short, I'm not going to check all the other code branches, especially with all the age prompt and the ice cream prompts. That just really slowing us down here. But you really should check all of your code branches and test them out to make sure that they work properly. Alrighty, so there you have it, nested if statements. Okay, going back here to VS Code. There's a few more operators that I want to share with you here. Now, this one is not critical for this class, but you will run into it later. But I do want to show it to you here. So I'm going to put a comment right here, and I'm going to make it say the strict equality operator. Okay, and then it's actually 3 equal signs. So in parentheses, I'm going to put 3 equal signs right there. Okay, now to set this up, I want to show you, I want to declare a few variables. So first, and I'm going to use const. So it doesn't matter, I could use let here for this example, but I'll just use const because I don't think these are going to change. So I'm going to declare a variable called some number, and I'm going to assign it with the assignment operator, the equal sign. I'm going to assign it a value of 7. Okay, now you should know that the data type of this variable is a number. Okay, Now I'm going to declare another variable, and I'm going to call it some string like that, and I'm going to assign it the value of 7, but it's going to be inside of quotation marks. Okay, so now both of these variables store the same value. They both store 7, but the data types are not the same. One is a number and one is a string. Okay, so here, if I do an if statement here, so you type this with me, set the table for an if statement. Okay, there we go. If pair of parentheses, pair of curly braces, split them curlies apart. I say that all the time with my beginning students, and I wake up at night hearing myself saying that. Okay, anyways, the Boolean expression here is we're going to check to see if some number is double equal to some string. Okay, and then if that's true, then we'll just console log same. Or true, I'll just console log true. Okay, now I want to run this code and I don't want to see all those other prompts. So I'm going to comment out all the code up until this sample right here. So I'm going to scroll up and comment out all of the stuff that we did so far, just because I don't want to see those prompts. So I'm going to be careful when you do this. You want to put your comments in the right places. So I'm going to use the multi-line comments like that. Okay, and now the only code that's going to run are these lines of code right here. Okay, now if I save this and then go back to the browser and hit F12 to open up the console, there we go, I got true. Okay, so that's because the values of both of these variables are the same. They're both 7. Okay, so that's the equality operator. We've already learned about that. But now what I'm going to do is go ahead and copy this if statement and paste it below itself like that. And I'm going to add another equal sign here right there. Okay, so there's 3 equal sign. This is what we call the strict equality operator. And that means that what that does is it not only checks the value of each of these variables, it checks the data type too. And the value and the data type have to be the same. Just to prove this, I'm going to go ahead and turn this into an if-else statement. So I'll go else, and then pair of curly braces, split them curlies, and then here I'll console log false. Okay, so what I'm expecting to see is true for our first if statement here, and false for the second one. Okay, and that's the difference between the double equal sign, the equality operator, and the triple equal sign, which is the strict equality operator. If I go ahead and save that, and then go back to the browser and refresh, there's my true for the first if statement, and there's my false for when we use the triple equal sign. All right, I got one more for us here, and then we'll be done with this video. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is another operator, and this one, I'm going to put a comment here. This one is called the negation operator. Okay, and it's just the exclamation mark, and it's also known as the not operator. Okay, now this one can get you into trouble if you're not careful, but I want to show it to you because you'll see a lot of programmers use it. So what this does is it flips a Boolean expression. When you're using a Boolean expression in an if statement, it'll reverse it. So if the expression would normally turn out to be true, it would make it false. And then the code inside your if statement won't run depending on how you set up your if statement. If the Boolean expression is false, it would flip it so that it becomes true. Now that sounds kind of weird, but let me show you what I mean here. I'm going to go ahead and declare a const, and let's just say it's called done with homework, camel case like that. So it's supposed to be true or false. Are you done with your homework? And I'm going to set it equal to false. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to use that in the Boolean expression of an if statement here. So I'm going to set up my if statement, if pair of parentheses, pair of curly braces, split the curlies apart. And then here's what I'm going to do for my Boolean expression. I want to, if I just put this in here, done with homework, that's checking to see if done with homework is true or false. If it was true, then we would dive into this code branch. if it was false, as it is here, then nothing would happen because we don't have an else block here. Okay, so, but what I want to do here is if I use the not operator and it goes right here at the beginning of your Boolean expression, by the way, a variable all by itself is an expression, and because this variable stores a Boolean, it makes it a Boolean expression, which results in false because that's what the variable is storing. Okay, but if I put the negation operator right here by putting the exclamation mark, you can read it aloud as not. So the way I would read this code here is if not done with homework, then we're gonna dive into this code block. Okay, so it totally flips a Boolean expression. If it would normally result in true, using the not operator would make it false. If it normally results in false, using the not operator makes it true, like a double negative. Okay, so here, since I'm using the not operator, I'm just going to console log inside this code block here. You know, get to work, finish your homework. Okay, so now this is a pretty straightforward example of how the not operator is used, and it can trip you up. It can cause some weird, if you're not careful, it can make you want to pull your hair out when you're dealing with Boolean expressions. And that's why I didn't want to show it to you when we talked about operators. But you will see people use it a lot. And I just want you to think that whenever you see it used in a Boolean expression, you can just say not. So that's why they call it the not operator, but technically it's called the negation operator. Okay, so here I'm just going to run this code right here. And if I save this, let's just talk about this one more time. We are not done with our homework. We set that to false, so we're not done with our homework. And here, if we didn't have the negation operator here, we'd be checking to see if done with homework is true. Okay, but because we put the not operator, we're checking actually to see if it's false. And if it's false, then we're going to dive into this code block. That's a little confusing. We can talk about this in class though, but you will see the not operator used quite a bit in code. Let me just go ahead and save this and then Alt Tab over to the browser here and reload the page here. And you can see that our code ran because we were not done with our homework, meaning that done with homework was false. And that's because we used the negation operator. Okay, that'll do it for this episode.